Welcome to this overview of decarbonisation and why Northern Ireland companies should be aware of the trends. Over the next 5 minutes or so, we hope to make you aware of one of the greatest challenges of our time and how this will affect your business. In this short video, we will outline what do we mean when we talk about decarbonisation. We will explain some of the key decarbonisation themes that are impacting and will shape the Northern Ireland economy and businesses into the future. We will also outline potential next steps for you to consider in response to decarbonisation challenges and how to position your business to avail of potential opportunities. Many of the activities that underpin the global economy results in the release of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. These gases only make up a very small percentage of Earth's atmosphere. However, there is consensus in the scientific community that these gases arising from human activity is leading to a warming effect of the planet and climate change. These emissions could arise from fueling our transport fleets with petrol or diesel, or through the burning of oil, gas, and other fossil fuels to heat our buildings, meet our industrial heat needs, or generate the electricity that powers our businesses. In some instances, the business activity itself can release carbon without the use of fossil fuels, such as producing cement or rearing livestock. Governments, society, and businesses have mobilised and are applying pressure on organisations to reduce the amount of carbon they release into the atmosphere, i.e. their carbon footprint. You will have heard about the UN COP26 climate change conference, which took place in Glasgow last year. At their core, these conferences are a formal negotiation session for countries to advance their climate commitments and actions, and also acts as an important forum for stakeholders from around the world to discuss the climate change solutions. COP26 made progress towards delivering on the Paris Agreement goals of limiting global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius on pre-industrial levels. But the world is definitely not on track to limit the increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius on the basis of the plan submitted today. Examples of initiatives arising from Glasgow which will impact Northern Ireland businesses include, but is not limited to, a new requirement for net zero transition plans for companies listed in the UK, the establishment of a new International Sustainability Standards Board, and the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. The UK is a leader in the drive for decarbonisation, and in 2019, the UK government became the first government to adopt a legally binding target of net zero by 2050. This does not mean that the UK will not release any carbon in 2050. Rather, net zero means that carbon emissions combined with carbon removal will result in net zero carbon released in that year. This ambition has resulted in a raft of policy and regulation measures. These measures include carrots, such as the availability of grants and loans to businesses, and sticks, such as a planned ban on the sale of new petrol and diesel vehicles starting in 2030. In February, the Northern Ireland Assembly voted for a net zero target to bring Northern Ireland in line with other parts of the UK. With energy accounting for almost 60% of Northern Ireland's greenhouse gas emissions, Northern Ireland's new energy strategy is a welcome support, but much more will be needed to meet our ambition. And it's not just states that are planning to decarbonise. A number of UK cities have plans to be net zero by 2030. Examples include Bristol, Nottingham, and Leicester. The private sector also sees decarbonisation as a key and urgent issue. This is driven by a combination of customers' growing awareness of how their lifestyles and products impact the environment, along with the realisation that climate change will materially impact most businesses and will materially impact the bottom line. Investors and providers of capital increasingly want to understand what climate change risks businesses are facing and what they are doing to mitigate this. Transparency is key, with a number of mandatory and optional frameworks supporting disclosures. In Northern Ireland, the Streamlined Energy and Carbon Reporting Regulations, or SECR regulations, requires affected companies, i.e. quoted and unquoted companies, as well as LLPs, to publicly report on or disclose their greenhouse gas emissions and energy consumption annually. Decarbonisation requires us to look at our business activities and products and to embrace change and transformation in order to reduce the carbon footprint of our businesses. This will have benefits as well as challenges. Increased climate considerations and disclosures provide greater access to finance and green finance. New low carbon products and services can lead to growth and higher margins. Much of the most carbon intensive activities and processes are legacy and inefficient parts of our businesses. Adopting low and zero carbon technologies can increase efficiency and reduce cost, such as installing solar panels to supply our own electricity, or switching haulage fuel from diesel to compressed natural gas, or God forbid, even maybe holding a meeting online rather than in person. Many brands have established themselves using green credentials and now dominate the public sphere of influence while also attracting green premium. I hope you now have a greater understanding of how the path to decarbonisation will affect your business, both from an obligations and opportunities point of view. We will now look at some of the decarbonisation trends in more detail. These trends can be thought of in terms of ambition and maturity, and how this evolves over time as we look to transition from understanding our carbon emissions today and taking the easy actions through to decarbonising hard to abate sectors such as aviation, which, as you know, burns a lot of jet fuel. Companies as diverse as Coca-Cola and John Sisk have set net zero targets, committing themselves to decarbonising their operations and value chains. In all, more than 2,000 businesses and financial institutions are working with the Science Based Targets Initiatives, or SBTI, to reduce their emissions in line with climate science. The SBTI framework involves, firstly, establishing a decarbonisation target and committing to it. Then, developing an emissions reduction plan, submitting the target to the SBTI for validation, and then informing stakeholders and reporting company-wide emissions and progress against targets on an annual basis. In the short term, many organisations are focusing on decarbonising their heat and transport, as these are the easiest and quickest to abate. The direction of travel is clear, with increasing regulation and disclosure requirements coming from the public and private spheres. In response, we are seeing more ambitious and mature organisations embed their decarbonisation as a core tenet of their overall business strategy. Looking to the longer term and harder to abate sectors such as the cement and aviation industries, where there is a lack of mature and cost-effective low and zero carbon alternatives, businesses are positioning themselves to embrace new business models, supply chains, and new technologies to reach net zero. These moves are being supported at national and international levels. So what does this all mean for industry and business in Northern Ireland? Decarbonisation will require the transformation of many sectors of the economy. However, transformation will also bring opportunities to enter new markets and offer new products aligned to the UK's green industrial revolution ambition and Northern Ireland's 10x economy. Doing nothing risks reputational damage with your communities, workforce, customers, and investors. As the global and Northern Ireland economy decarbonises, doing nothing risks legacy carbon-intensive assets and products becoming stranded assets, putting slow-moving businesses at a competitive disadvantage as they fail to take advantage of green finance, efficiency improvements, and risk becoming less integrated with the economy's decarbonised supply chain. We will now outline some potential next steps you should consider to start preparing your business for decarbonisation. The first step is to measure and understand your current carbon and greenhouse gas emissions. The standard approach is to categorise emissions into 3 segments: Scope 1 emissions, Scope 2, and Scope 3. Put simply, Scope 1 emissions are direct emissions from the resources your business owns or controls. Scope 2 emissions are indirect emissions arising from the things purchased and consumed by your business. Purchases would include such things as electricity. Scope 3 emissions includes all other indirect emissions, such as purchased goods and services, business travels, the emissions from the commuting of your employees, etc. Across these scopes, it is important to identify the most carbon-intensive activities to target the most material areas. Development of an approach to annual carbon accounting and disclosure is also a critical task. Once you understand your carbon footprint, you can start defining your vision for decarbonising your business and set realistic ambitions and achievable targets. Next comes the implementation plan to deliver on your ambition and targets. This entails understanding the options and supports available to decarbonise your business to establish implementation programs. That concludes our overview. Thank you for your time. I do hope you have found this video useful.